Good afternoon, or evening, or morning, or whenever you listen to this. This is my first, I think, full length video post for Substack. I think I've uploaded some videos before, but this is the first time that I've recorded this on the Substack platform. And I call this message to you the glory question and the phases of faith. And I want to welcome all the new subscribers. I mean, I've had so many people, new people, come to me, subscribe to my Substack, and most of them that are coming who are new are people who want to know about the phases of faith. They've gotten interested in it, they want more details about it. And so I know that as people are wanting to know about that, I want to give a little review about what the phases of faith are to show you an example of how it works in a real life situation, the knowledge of it, and then to talk to you about this idea of glory, which has intrigued me. Many people want to know, do the phases work in real life? And during the first decade of our marriage, my husband and Dan and I had people living with us all the time, and that continued throughout the 40 some odd years we were married, except at the end when my husband, of course, was ill and we didn't have people in. But it was not unusual before then for us to have entire families to live with us for months on, on end. People of other races, people of other cultures, people of other nations, and so we loved having people in our home. We also were kind of a way station for people traveling through. And one time, a minister, a very prominent minister, called and said he'd like to spend the night with us, maybe a day or two. And when he arrived, we sat and ate brownies and had caffeine and visited a little bit. And he got a phone call in the middle of that conversation. And he went into the bedroom, talked on the phone for a bit, came back out, and he was visibly shaken. And he said, I'm going to need to go on to bed. And so he went to bed, and Dan and I didn't know what was going on. And so when we got up the next morning, this man is sitting fully dressed at our kitchen table with his suitcase packed beside him. And he said to me, "You started saying something when I got the phone call last night about a new concept that you're starting to teach, and it is the phases of faith. Would you tell me about that?" And I said, "Sure." So I described to him about the three phases of faith. Phase one, the absolutes. Phase two, the contradictions. Phase three, the resolutions. And we discussed briefly that what had happened to him was a contradiction to the promises of God, a God who had promised him that he would promote, I won't say promote his ministry, but that he would be with him during his ministry, as he always had been. And of course, God promises always to be with us. So that wasn't a promise just specific to this man. But he felt that what had happened with this phone call had been a contradiction to the promises that God had made. So after I got through telling him about the phases of faith, he realized he was in a contradiction. He realized how had to go back to and cling to the promises of God, that he had to look for a resolution. And he said, "That's exactly what I needed." Finished his morning uh, uh, drink and took off. And of course, we stayed in touch with him very closely for the rest of our lives and still good friends with him now. But that made a difference. And he said this about that. He said, without exaggeration, Lataine's teaching on the phases of faith has literally changed my life. Now, this information, this formula, this map is as straightforward as you want it to be and as rich and complex as you will let it be. Like all biblical principles, it's on one level so simple that a child can grasp it, and yet it can be pondered endlessly by a searching heart. It is a reawakening to timeless truths. Here's the map in the simplest way I can tell you. Number one, phase one, God gives us absolutes like commands, promises, symbols, and covenants. They're solid and helpful and reassuring, even if they're a command we don't want to keep. We know they're absolute, and even that brings us comfort. That's phase one. Phase two, every single human being runs up against obstacles or contradictions as they try to wrestle with the keeping the commandments, believing the promises, living out the symbols, being part of the covenants. We find ourselves in a middle phase where the phase one absolutes seem very, very difficult. In fact, our crises, our contradictions get in our face and they scream at us and they demand our attention and they take our attention away from the phase one promises. They might even tell us, that phase one stuff doesn't work because look how real your contradiction is. But in phase three, God is a faithful God. He is able to richly and abundantly keep his promises if we're faithful too. The completion of the map, the third phase, is what we call a resolution, absolute contradiction resolution. And in a way, it's a sigh of relief. It's a treasure perfectly crafted for each individual as they come out of their contradiction into a resolution. Our visitor showed that knowing about the phases of faith was enough for him, and it's enough for you too. But how challenging life is. Sometimes God lets a situation get to the point where it looks completely hopeless, so that when it is resolved, we will recognize that it's his power and not our own which has rescued us. But unless we're willing to wait to get to that point, we never can know for sure if God has resolved the situation. A good example of this is what happened when Jesus was called by Mary and Martha because their brother Lazarus was sick. And they said, "Come right away. Your friend that you love is very sick." But Jesus deliberately delayed. And when he got to the grave, of course, Lazarus had been in the tomb for days. And Jesus let it get to this point, apparently, because it kind of caused a dividing line. Because when some people saw that Jesus had raised the dead, they couldn't explain it away like they would of a healing. Made some people angry, gave other people faith. That's what God does when he acts like that. It causes dividing lines. Now, my teaching on these phases of faith is in these two books. This is The Hinge of Your History, which gives a detailed study of the phases of faith in the life of Abraham and Sarah. And after all, Abraham is the father of our faith, the Bible tells us, and that we walk in his footsteps. This one is, I guess, kind of like a phases of faith light, kind of a dip your feet in the water, get familiar with the terminology. It's got interactive exercises, lots of things to help you get started on your journey through the phases of faith. Some people don't learn well by reading. I also offer classes. And whereas my books cost, each book costs like a fast food meal, I mean, real expensive. I actually have a basic training mini class on the phases of faith for only $29. You and your spouse can't go to the movies and buy popcorn for $29, right? Links are in the post below. My class trainings give you tons of practical things to do. At least in my full class, I end up giving you over 50 strategies where you can learn how to handle contradictions. Now, I'm in a great big contradiction right now, and I bet you are too, because none of us lives life, no Christian lives life without being in some sort of contradiction at one time or another about one of the promises of God, trying to keep a commandment of God, trying to live in the covenants of God, trying to be a symbol or understand the symbols of God. We're all in contradictions. And something hit me like a ton of bricks. And this is something that even my most veteran students don't know. This is a new concept for them. It's the idea of earnest expectation in asking God the right questions. Most of my strategies are what you do in relationship to God. This one is, what questions can you ask God? And one of my favorite scriptures is this one from Psalm 123:2. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a maidservant to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord till he has mercy on us. Psalm 123:2. So, what is the right question to ask God in a contradiction? I think I've got a good one. And it's this: to ask God, what will you, God, do in my contradiction that will rightly bring glory to you? He is super zealous slash jealous of his reputation. For instance, when the Israelites set up a golden calf and started telling everybody that that was the gods that led them out of Egypt, he got his feelings hurt. God got his feelings hurt. He did not want to be known as cow. He said this in Isaiah. He says, I am the Lord. That is my name. I will not give my glory to another. And he actually even said in Isaiah 43:21 that he created people. He formed people for himself so that they would declare his praise. And also in the links below in this video, I have a whole list of different scriptures about God desiring glory for himself. That's in an article by John Piper, who is familiar to many of you. But the one scripture that sticks in my mind that I thought of as soon as I thought of the idea that we ask God the questions about how he will bring about his glory, it's when God was telling Moses, just before they got to the Red Sea, he says, I'm going to harden, in other words, freeze frame, stop action, the heart of Pharaoh, um, so that he would pursue them, get the situation to a crisis point. And then God said this, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Now, at first, we might rankle against the idea of a God who sets things up just so that he gets glory, just so his reputation is enhanced, who demands that he get credit for all these good things he did. I mean, is that totally unreasonable? I mean, why should he expect that? A little humor. But would it surprise you to know that C.S. Lewis actually had a big issue with this, a big problem? He said in his book, Reflections on the Psalms, he said that he was disturbed for years because he thought that God's desire to get praise was beneath him, that that was like a human characteristic, that God would want to be adored. And again, we can look and say, well, why wouldn't God want to be adored? What's not to adore about him? But this is an issue, of God setting things up. But the blockbuster understanding that's come to me is when I'm in a contradiction, if I'm concentrating on how a third phase resolution will benefit me, I'm being short sighted. How much better to ask God in the midst of a contradiction? Ask Him, what will you do in this situation that will rightly bring glory to you? And the second part, how can I cooperate with you toward that goal, your glory, when you bring about a resolution to my situation? One way to start understanding that is with the Lord's Prayer. And I have gained such an appreciation for the Lord's Prayer recently in my life. Now, in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, we're asking for personal help. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive others. Lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from the evil one. Me. Us. Do this, do this. But if you look at what bookends that prayer, if you look at the beginning of it, it's talking about that we address our Father who is in heaven, a glorious place. We're asking that his name be hallowed, be respected, be revered, be praised, be glorified, which is all about seeing him as holy. We're saying, thy kingdom come. He is king who merits all this, that his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And both of these are about how he is the focus of human history, not us. And the ending of the Lord's Prayer, listen, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. No wonder he told us to pray that way, to bookend our prayers to him with glory to him on the front end and glory to him on the back end. Because when we say that, when we do that, we are acknowledging what is really real, what is true in heaven, what is true on earth, what is really real. Only by him being glorified in my own mind, in my own heart, can I possibly have a correct view of reality. Do you want to know more? Do you want this expanded view of reality? Holding up the books again. It's summer. You have time to read. Read these books. Links below. Let me end by saying this. If you're not getting the right answers to your problems, perhaps you're not asking God the right question. See you next time.